FBI, Border Patrol, and ICE agents have already been spotted on patrols in parts of the city, and residents say they are seeing a surge in law enforcement. Separately, the Washington Post reports the Pentagon is looking into possibly creating a military reaction force for civil unrest, with hundreds of troops on standby to deploy to American cities. And while no one is arguing crime is not a problem that does need to be addressed, many Washingtonians say they are very uncomfortable with the president deploying the military to police Americans on American streets. Some even say the move is nothing more than a distraction.
The whole idea that there is some kind of a crisis of disorder in D.C. is a made-up, phony story to distract attention from deteriorating economy, from the ICE rage, which horrify even people who wanted action on immigration, and of course from the Epstein files. It's all a game of diversion. I think this administration would like to take over not only D.C., but any state or jurisdiction that doesn't completely bend the knee.
Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, New York Times chief White House correspondent, and MSNBC political analyst Peter Baker, and Puck congressional correspondent Abby Livingston. So, Vaughn, one of the big questions I have
MSNBC is on.
The crime stats in D.C. haven't changed. There hasn't been an upswing in crime. There was that one incident with the Doge employee. But beyond that, my question to you with this move by the president is, why now?
Why not?
Why now is, I think, the question in all of this, Katie, and that is the fact that the president, we have seen time and again, he has turned to crime, whether it was in his first administration, when he took on John Lewis, criticizing him that he was all talk, no action. Down in Atlanta in addressing crime, he called Baltimore at one point in 2019 rodent and rat infested. He's taken on Chicago during his New York criminal and civil fraud trials. He went on the attack suggesting that New York had been overcome by crime. In each of these cases, reality just did not match up with his depiction. But for the president here, he sees this as a political win. I think that we can attribute that to Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, just minutes ago, saying that she doesn't understand why Democrats are opposed to the actions that he is taking. That along with the use of the National Guard, that effectively last night, in the words of Caroline Leavitt, there were 23 arrests. She said somebody for homicide. She said somebody else for carjacking. And so each of these cases we'd have to go and verify, obviously. But the suggestion is that communities like D.C. should want this. And those that are opposed to it or suggest that violence and crime is not actually taking place are closing their eyes and blind to it. And so I think here we have a soundbite from Mayor Muriel Bowser, who is sort of in the middle of all of this. She is somebody who is really, over the course of the last 7 months, tried to not be too confrontational with this sitting president, understanding, like it's taking place right now, that the president could invoke the Home Rule Act and effectively take over her law enforcement or even use it for even bigger purposes. Take a listen to the mayor just moments ago after meeting with Attorney General Pam Bondi.
What I'm focused on is the federal surge and how to make the most of the additional officer support that we have. So how we got here or what we think about the circumstances right now, we have more police and we want to make sure we use it.
Look, and Katie, this is the posture of the police chief who is standing there alongside the mayor as well, that they are going to work with federal agents to, over the next month, effectively try to help address any issues of crime that do exist here in this city. And I think just one example of this, again, is that Washington Commanders football stadium, Katie. The city council is set to vote next month on the deal. The president literally last month threatened to block the stadium deal. They currently play over in Maryland, and the city would like to move them onto where the old RFK stadium is, currently here in D.C. And the president could very well seek with Republican support in Congress to invoke the Home Rule Act in that case as well and seek to block that stadium deal. So there's such a power dynamic here at play, but the president clearly sees this as a political win, the idea of taking on crime, and this was what he used heavily during his 2024 campaign just a few months ago.
Yeah, and Abby, that's a really good point. This idea that pick an issue that is hard to fight with by saying that he's going to go after crime, he's going to clean up the streets. It's a hard issue for Democrats to push back on because if they do so, they run the risk of saying or making it sound like they're okay with crime. So what have you heard from Democrats in the vein of this and how they are trying to combat the president on this and
what about the Republicans?
push back on him invoking this, again, exceptional authority that has not been invoked before?
The Washington leaders I've spoken with say they believe that this was launched as a distraction from the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And so the concern is, how much does this accelerate? Does he turn the heat up? And at some point, I think we're going to see Washington leaders reach out to Democrats on the Hill for support, because it's important to remember Washington is not a state, and so it is under much more federal control than any other city.
So does he turn the heat up, Peter, or is this just for show? Because the National Guard on the streets, they can't arrest people. They can patrol, they can make calls and call the police in to arrest people. That's the purview of the local police department. So how much of this is actually effective crime fighting and how much of it is just the picture of these guys on the streets?
He likes the picture of these guys on the streets. He liked the picture of the guys, the military guys on the streets of Los Angeles. This is the second time in 6 months of this term that this president has sent armed military people into city streets to deal with issues that are normally dealt with by civilian police organizations. And this is something that we don't see in the United States. We fought crime for 250 years in the United States without turning it over to the military. And that's something you normally see, military troops in the streets of a capital, the kind of thing you see in other countries, in autocratic countries, by autocratic leaders who are trying to assert control and power. If you really cared about crime in the District of Columbia, where crime is actually down historically, if you actually care about crime in America, there are cities with worse crime rates than Washington, D.C. He's not sending troops into their streets. He's sending troops into the street of the nation's capital, which has a special resonance. The idea that troops would be patrolling in any way, a nation's capital sends a message that we've never, seen again in this country outside of, riots and genuine uprisings that we don't see right now. Crime is at a low. As anybody who has grown up in the Washington area, as I did, I was born and raised in the Washington area, spent my whole life there, and it's never. We know what a crime crisis looks like. We've lived through that. This is not what that looks like.
The question I have is about Bukele. Donald Trump has cozied up to him. He's praised him, and I wonder how much he wants, to be able to crack down on crime the way the El Salvadorian leader has been able to do so. It's not a democratic country the way this country is. You don't have, this president doesn't have the authority or the powers that an authoritarian like Bukele does. But after Donald Trump decided to put these troops on the streets and to federalize the law enforcement in Washington, Abby, Bukele sent out a tweet or a post on X praising him and saying, I'm paraphrasing, it looks like he's doing what we did here. Is that the desire to look like he is strong, to appear strong, to make it seem like he is the one who can fix it, I alone can fix it?
Well, I think he is rolling into D.C., and the D.C. leaders say this could happen elsewhere. I think what the next pivot point of this is whether or not there are protests, and then how these forces react to that. We saw a lot of this in the summer of 2020, and it became escalatory. And so I think that's the next pivot point in whether Trump wants the protests and then what he does when they happen.
That is a good point. Vaughn, in terms of numbers and expectations, we had the AG meeting with the mayor today, Mayor Muriel Bowser, and the head of police there in Washington. Do they have a sense of how many troops from the National Guard are going to be on the ground, how many FBI agents will be patrolling, what the Border Patrol is going to be doing on the streets, what that's actually going to look like in practice?
More than 24 hours after the announcement from the White House, I think that it's telling that there have been such few specifics that have been provided by either the federal government or by the local law enforcement or the mayor's office. In large part, right, I was told just minutes before the 10 a.m. Event yesterday at the White House that the mayor's office had yet to get a briefing from anybody at the White House. And so this was not something that they worked in tandem on ahead of time. And there were National Guardsmen and women that were arriving just today at the armory down the road. It is not clear exactly what role they are going to play. It is not clear whether they will be carrying weapons or not. And in the case of yesterday, according to the White House press secretary, there were 850 federal agents and local law enforcement that were surged, in her words, into the streets. And for anybody that was walking around, I'm sure Peter saw this as well, there were police cars all about. There was crowds on one street corner I saw as one man was being detained, and there were people started filming on the side of the road, that encounter taking place, and there is this skepticism about the work of law enforcement, which is difficult for a great many of the men and women who serve in law enforcement or serve in the National Guard, that they are being placed with these tasks at a time in which there are deep questions about the necessity of this expanded force. One thing that I would say to the question, Katie, that you asked real fast of Abby there, was I think it is important to go back to that 2024 campaign. And the president was lauding autocrats like Viktor Orban and Bukele. And I remember very clearly at a rally in New Hampshire, the night that he said, quote, "It's nice to have a strong man running your country." I think that those words were telling a year later here. This is somebody, to Peter's point, that sees the expanded executive power and the ability to use the military in American streets as a benefit to him, his administration, and American neighborhoods. That's the pitch that he's willing to make.
Yeah, Von Hilliard, Peter Baker, Abby Livingston, thank you very much for starting us off. Coming up next, what President Trump's pick to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics thinks about the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Plus, is the White House building a new religious movement? We're back in 90 seconds.
Okay. That was said.